All right, settle down, you degenerates. You know, watching this episode of Family Guy, Season 20, Episode 3, I couldn't help but think about the sheer audacity of the show's creators. It feels like they've been running on fumes for years, and then bam, they drop an episode that's just there. Like a weird uncle at Thanksgiving who shows up unannounced, eats all the good appetizers, and then leaves without saying goodbye. This episode feels like a prime example of that. It's got all the usual Family Guy ingredients, random pop culture references, baffling character choices, and Peter Griffin doing something monumentally stupid. But this time, it's all sort of drizzled with a sauce of mild existential dread. You've got Marge Simpson showing up for Halloween, which is already a fever dream, and then Peter immediately ditches Lois to go do some nebulous, dangerous speedball. Like, dude, it's Halloween, not your midlife crisis speed dating event. And then we get this Borat impression from Mayor West that's so far past its expiration date, it's practically fossilized. Honestly, the whole thing feels like a fever dream assembled from discarded sketch comedy bits and a deep-seated fear of anything remotely original. But hey, at least it's got us talking, right? Because by the end of this thing, you're going to be asking yourself, what the actual heck did I just watch? And why did it make me feel so something? Stay tuned, because we're diving head first into this beautiful mess. So if you're new around here, make sure you're subscribed. We're the ones who actually watch these episodes and try to make sense of them so you don't have to. And honestly, based on this one, that's a public service. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because you won't want to miss our deep dives into the absurdity that is modern Family Guy. We break it all down, the good, the bad, and the completely baffling. Now, let's talk about what this episode, Family Guy Season 20, Episode 3, is actually trying to be. On the surface, it's a Halloween episode, which usually means the show can get a little wild with costumes and scenarios. We get Peter ditching candy duty for a drug binge, which is peak Peter. Then there's Meg getting shut down hard by Mayor West doing a Borat impression that's about 15 years too late to be relevant, and honestly, it's painful. Stewie's got a killer candy score thanks to his oh my god reaction GIF costume, which is a decent gag that speaks to how much we live our lives online now. And then the main event, Quagmire is trying to impress a woman by pretending Brian is his dog, which is somehow both incredibly stupid and perfectly on brand for Quagmire. Brian, of course, is none too pleased about being drafted into the charade. The episode juggles these storylines, or at least tries to, with varying degrees of success. It feels like they started with a bunch of disconnected ideas and tried to stitch them together with duct tape and vague Halloween vibes. The underlying theme, if you can even call it that, seems to be about deception and trying to be something you're not, whether it's Quagmire faking a pet or Peter faking, well, anything. It also touches on how we present ourselves online and in social situations, with Stewie's GIF costume and the constant pressure to seem like you have your life together, especially in dating. It's a messy episode, and honestly, the writing feels a bit all over the place. Some jokes land with a thud, while others are surprisingly sharp. The pacing is all over the place too. One minute we're at the Quahog PD, the next we're in a coffee shop discussing Succession. It's like they threw a bunch of plot threads at the wall and hoped some of them would stick. My personal verdict? It's a forgettable episode, but not in a good way. It's not so bad that it's good, it's just bland. It's the kind of episode you watch, shrug, and then immediately forget the details of. It feels like a placeholder, a contractual obligation, and not a showcase for the show's actual talent. It's a middle-of-the-road effort that doesn't elevate the season or even do much to stand out in the show's long history. Let's start by dissecting one of the earliest moments, the opening song. It's basically Family Guy's way of saying, hey, remember the good old days? They trot out the Marge Simpson impression for Halloween greetings, and then immediately pivot to Peter's nonsensical and frankly dangerous plan to do a dangerous speedball. I mean, can we talk about the whiplash? One second it's wholesome family holiday greetings, the next it's Peter auditioning for the worst possible death scene in Hollywood. It's such a classic Family Guy move, take something innocent and twist it into something bizarre and slightly alarming. What this moment is actually trying to say is that Peter is incapable of normal adult responsibilities, even on Halloween. He's always going to choose the most self-destructive, attention-seeking path. And the show, by extension, is saying that's just who he is. It's not a commentary on drug use. It's just Peter being Peter. If I were rewriting this, I'd probably have Peter say something even more absurd, like he needs to go do a high-stakes game of Uno that requires him to be jacked up on energy drinks and questionable substances. That way, it's still Peter being irresponsible, but it leans into the ridiculousness of his personality without brushing up against genuinely dark themes in such a flippant way. It would still be funny in its own way and less likely to make you feel vaguely uneasy. My personal reaction to the scene is just a tired sigh. It's like, okay, we get it, Peter's a mess. Can we move on to something actually interesting? It's a recurring gag that's long past its expiration date. Then there's the Mayor West Borat impression. Meg, bless her heart, tries to compliment his costume, and he hits her with this painfully dated Borat impression. The joke is that Borat came out ages ago, and nobody remembers it, but West acts like it's the hottest new thing. The problem is, it's not just West who's out of touch. It's the writers for thinking this is still a funny premise. Meg's response, yeah, that movie came out like 15 years ago, is the audience's reaction voiced through the character. It's meta, sure, but it's also just sad. What this moment is doing is trying to make a point about aging and relevance, or at least that's what it thinks it's doing. But it comes off as the show itself being out of touch, projecting its own irrelevance onto the characters. It's like the writers are the old guy at the party who keeps telling the same joke from a decade ago, thinking everyone's still laughing. If I rewrote this, I'd have Mayor West try to do a current pop culture reference, but get it completely wrong. Like, he tries to imitate a TikTok dance move but does it backwards, or he thinks a popular meme is something from the early 2000s. That would be funnier because it would make West seem like he's trying to be relevant and failing, rather than just being stuck in the past with a specific impression. It makes the failure more active and less passive. Honestly, my reaction is mostly embarrassment. For West, for Borat, and for the writers who thought this was a good idea. It's a joke that requires you to be as out of touch as the character to find it funny, and that's a tough sell. Next up, we have the trick-or-treaters at Peter's house who are understandably upset when they get apples instead of candy.
Peter's response, kill yourself. There's a lot of sugar in an apple. If you saw the numbers, you'd be shocked. Is just pure Peter. It's cruel, it's illogical, and it's delivered with zero remorse. This is one of those moments where Peter's awfulness is supposed to be funny, but it often just lands as bleak. The kids are just asking for candy, a basic Halloween expectation, and Peter responds with suicidal ideation and questionable nutritional advice. What this moment highlights is Peter's complete lack of empathy and his utter disregard for anyone but himself. He's not even trying to be a good dad. He's actively being a terrible host and a genuinely unpleasant person. It reinforces the idea that the Griffins are perpetually stuck in this cycle of bad behavior, and the show expects us to laugh at it. My rewrite here would involve Peter actually explaining why he's giving apples in a ridiculously over-the-top conspiracy theory kind of way. Like, they're seeding us with microchips through the candy, kids. Apples are the only safe, natural way to experience Halloween. It's still Peter being weird and anti-establishment, but it turns it into a more inventive gag than just being a cruel jerk. It makes him more of a bizarre character and less of a straight-up monster. My reaction is a groan. It's the same old song and dance with Peter being a terrible person, and it's just not landing anymore. It feels lazy. Then we get the pilot costume guy, who's actually John Travolta walking into his backyard airport. This is a pretty specific and clever joke. The guy explains he's just a regular guy, which is of course a callback to Travolta's infamous interview where he said he was just a regular guy and then immediately launched into a bizarre Scientology rant. The wife's adorable niece also gets a quick mention with the excuse about the adult Halloween party, which is a decent little side gag that plays on the show's often strained family dynamics. This moment is great because it's a layered reference that rewards fans who pay attention to pop culture and celebrity. It's a visual gag tied to a specific, memorable real-life moment. What it's saying is that even seemingly normal people have their weird quirks, and sometimes those quirks are incredibly public. It also subtly pokes fun at the idea of celebrity personas versus reality. If I were to tweak this, I'd maybe have the pilot guy's plane be something ridiculous, like a miniature Learjet that's clearly just a prop, adding another layer of absurdity to his regular guy claim. Or have him mention something about being able to fly any plane, and then a squirrel flies out of the cockpit. It's about leaning into the inherent silliness of the premise. My reaction here is a genuine chuckle. It's a smart, well-executed joke that feels earned. It's the kind of reference that makes you feel like you're in on the joke. Stewie's "oh my god" reaction gif costume is, as I mentioned, a solid gag. Brian asks if people get it, and Stewie, with typical arrogance, says everyone's dressed as gifs. He even brings Pop into it, though it's unclear who Pop is. This is a good example of the show acknowledging modern internet culture, but doing it through Stewie's lens. He's not just participating, he's leading the charge. The humor comes from the idea that something as ephemeral as an internet GIF can be a tangible costume, and that Stewie is so on top of trends.
What it's showing us is the evolution of communication and how visual, meme-based content has become a dominant force, especially for younger generations. Stewie, as the precocious genius, is naturally at the forefront of this. If I were to tweak this, I'd have Stewie try to explain why it's the best costume ever, with a ridiculously complex, multi-step breakdown of the meme's cultural significance, only for Brian to just go, "So you're surprised?" The contrast between Stewie's overanalysis and Brian's deadpan simplicity is usually gold. My reaction is a nod of approval. It's a clever bit of observational humor that feels very of the moment, and Stewie pulling it off is peak Stewie. Now, let's get to the Quagmire storyline, which involves him trying to impress Carrie but having Brian pretend to be his dog. This is where the episode really starts to feel like a classic Family Guy plot. Quagmire doing something morally questionable and potentially disastrous for personal gain. Brian is reluctant, but Quagmire dangles the bait of 6 tennis balls, which Brian can't resist. The instruction to Brian is to act like a normal, well-behaved, non-talking dog. Of course, Brian immediately struggles with the non-talking part, coming up with Brack? Brack? This is where the humor and the conflict really begin. Quagmire's desperation and Brian's reluctant participation set the stage for maximum awkwardness. What this entire setup is about is Quagmire's inability to form genuine connections. He sees dating as a series of tricks and manipulations rather than honest interaction. He's willing to exploit his best friend to get laid.
Brian, on the other hand, is going along with it because he's both weak-willed when it comes to tennis balls and has a complex relationship with Quagmire that involves enabling him. If I were to rewrite this, the setup would be even more ridiculous. Maybe Quagmire tries to get Peter to be his dog, and Peter's barking sounds like he's ordering a beer. Or even better, Quagmire tries to rent a real dog, and it turns out to be a completely unmanageable rabid beast. But the core idea of Quagmire trying to fake a dog for dating purposes is solid. It just needs a stronger execution of Brian's inevitable failure. My reaction to Quagmire's scheme is a mixture of amusement and disgust. It's funny because it's so Quagmire, but also depressing because it's so Quagmire. It's that classic Family Guy tightrope walk between hilarious and uncomfortable. The coffee shop scene where Quagmire and Brian are trying to talk about succession names is a really interesting choice. Quagmire is using it as a way to connect with Carrie, and Brian is playing along, but there's this underlying tension. Carrie is genuinely engaged, discussing Kendall, Shiv, Roman, and Logan. Quagmire is just name-dropping, probably Googling them on his phone under the table. Brian, however, seems genuinely into it. This scene is a great example of how people use shared interests, or perceived shared interests, to bond. It's also a subtle dig at the intense fandom surrounding shows like Succession, and how people can get really invested in fictional characters and their drama. It's a very modern way of connecting, through pop culture. The fact that Quagmire is faking his interest is classic Quagmire. He's trying to be someone he's not to impress someone. The mention of the dog also pops up here, as Quagmire asks about Brian the dog's opinion on the show, further cementing the deception. If I were to change this, I'd have Quagmire get a crucial detail about Succession wrong, like confusing Logan for Roman, and Carrie gently correcting him, creating an awkward moment that Brian has to navigate. That would add a bit more immediate stakes to his lie. My reaction to the scene is mostly a smirk. It's a smart pop culture reference, and it's funny to see Quagmire try to keep up with the intellectual discourse. It's a moment that feels very of the show's current era. Stewie's biggest candy score ever, and his subsequent realization that he's been robbed, is a classic Stewie storyline. He's so proud of his haul, he's already planning his post-Halloween heist. Then the realization hits, he's been burgled. Rupert, the teddy bear, is brought in as his silent partner in crime investigation. The discovery of the engagement ring is a funny misdirection, a classic Stewie move to escalate the drama. The twist that it wasn't a real burglary, but just Peter stealing his candy, is the real payoff. It's the ultimate betrayal by the family patriarch. The analogy to the fat man when he plays Clue is a meta-joke that references the show's own often convoluted plotting and Peter's tendency to derail things. The episode within the episode about Peter playing Clue, where the murderer is "don't care" and the location is "I regret having children," is peak Family Guy humor. Nihilistic, self-referential, and completely absurd. It highlights Peter's inability to engage with anything seriously. What this whole sequence is about is the theme of family dysfunction and the lengths Peter will go to for his own selfish desires, even if it means stealing from his own son.
It's a commentary on how family can be both a source of comfort and a source of immense frustration. If I were to rewrite this, I'd make Stewie's security system even more elaborate and over the top, like laser grids and robotic guard dogs, only for Peter to bypass it by simply crawling through the doggy door. The contrast between Stewie's genius-level security and Peter's brute force stupidity is always a good source of humor. My reaction is a laugh. It's a classic Stewie plot, and the reveal that Peter is the culprit is satisfying in its predictability. The Clue meta-joke is also a nice touch. Quagmire's visit to the animal shelter is a moment of unexpected pathos, or at least the show attempts it. He's looking for a dog for his date with Carrie, but he's clearly out of his depth. The $1,500 Bichon Frise is a shocker, and his question about the return policy shows his transactional view of everything. The shelter worker's exasperated response about combing feces out of guinea pig hair is a darkly funny touch, painting a picture of the reality of animal care. Quagmire leaves empty-handed and dejected, stating, "Sorry we couldn't get you a dog. Come on in, we'll have however many beers it takes to forget how depressing the shelter was." This is a rare moment where Quagmire seems genuinely sad, or at least inconvenienced by his own fakery. It shows a sliver of his humanity beneath the sleaze. What this scene is really about is the pressure to conform to expectations in relationships.
Quagmire feels he needs a dog to be a good boyfriend, so he goes through the motions, even when it's depressing and expensive. It's a commentary on the superficiality that can creep into modern dating. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Quagmire actually try to adopt a dog, and it would be the most mangy, ill-behaved mutt imaginable, but he'd still try to spin it as charming to Carrie. That would lead to even more chaos later. My reaction to this scene is a bit of a mixed bag. It's nice to see a hint of vulnerability in Quagmire, but the whole dog setup is still so transparently a plot device for the Brian deception. It feels a little forced. Brian's dialogue with Quagmire where he agrees to pretend to be his dog is a pivotal moment. Quagmire lays it on thick, saying he appreciates Carrie as a person and that the sex is great, which sounds almost alien coming from him. Then he makes the ask, "I told her I have a dog, so would you pretend to be my dog?" Brian's initial reaction is laughter, but the mention of 6 tennis balls seals the deal. Brian's internal monologue, "I'm not doing this because I want to help. I'm only doing this so I can have a front row seat when you crash and burn," is the key to his motivation. He's not being a good friend, he's being a spectator to Quagmire's inevitable downfall. This is peak Brian. He's often complicit in the bad behavior of others, but he justifies it by telling himself he's morally superior or that he's learning something. This scene reveals the unhealthy codependency in their friendship. Brian enables Quagmire's bad behavior by participating in his schemes, but he also judges him for it. It's a self-serving kind of friendship. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Brian demand something truly outrageous in return for his services, like Quagmire having to wear a dog costume himself for a week or clean Brian's litter box. That would escalate the stakes of the deception and make Brian's participation even more begrudging and funnier. My reaction is a wry smile. It's a classic Brian-Quagmire dynamic. Brian knows Quagmire is a disaster waiting to happen, but he can't resist watching the fireworks. It's manipulative friendship at its finest. Quagmire's date with Carrie, where he introduces Brian as his dog Harvey, named after Weinstein, a truly bizarre and tasteless joke, is a masterclass in cringeworthy deception. Brian, as Harvey, is supposed to be a normal dog, but he can't help himself. When Quagmire's joke falls flat, Brian is forced to speak.
His line, "Can you start talking now, please?" is the dog's subtle plea for help, which Quagmire tries to cover by pretending Brian is licking his ear. Then Carrie reveals she also has a dog, Bob Weinstein, who is man's best friend because he's very good at keeping quiet. This is a brilliant reversal and a hilarious meta-commentary on the whole fake dog premise. It shows that Quagmire isn't the only one capable of elaborate deception, and Carrie might be onto him, or perhaps she's even more of a player than he is. The parallel dog mains are particularly inspired. What this scene is doing is taking Quagmire's scheme and turning it on its head, showing that his plan might be too clever by half, or that he's met his match. It's also a darkly funny nod to the Me Too movement, using a notorious figure as a punchline. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Brian's barking as Harvey be actual articulate complaints about Quagmire's behavior. "He always does this," Brian might whine, in a dog voice. That would make the deception even more transparent and funnier. My reaction here is a belly laugh. The Bob Weinstein reveal is a stroke of genius, and it completely deflates Quagmire's carefully constructed lie. It's a moment of pure comedic payoff. Stewie's trap for the candy thief is another inventive gag. He set up a trap with Rupert, and it involves a very elaborate, almost Rube Goldberg-esque contraption. The thief, who turns out to be Chris, is caught. Stewie's immediate accusation and Chris's denial set up the reveal that Peter is the actual candy thief. This is a moment that reinforces the idea that the family is the primary antagonist for each other. Stewie, the mastermind, is thwarted not by an outside force, but by his own father's greed. Chris, as usual, is just caught in the crossfire, and in this case, he's even taking the blame for Peter. The dialogue between Stewie and Chris about Peter being the culprit mirrors the earlier Fat Man analogy, showing how this is a recurring issue in their family. What this sequence is about is the cyclical nature of Peter's bad behavior and how it impacts everyone around him. Stewie's meticulous planning is undone by Peter's simple, gluttonous desire. It's a commentary on how even the most brilliant minds can be undone by the most basic of human flaws, especially when those flaws belong to your father. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Stewie's trap involve something more personal and humiliating for Peter, like a giant net that douses him in shame-inducing glitter, or a machine that forces him to confess all his embarrassing secrets.
It would be a more fitting punishment than just getting caught. My reaction is a knowing nod. This is the status quo for the Griffin family. Stewie plans, Peter ruins, Chris is collateral damage. It's predictable, but still amusing. The Family Guy opening song is iconic, and they bring it back here, but this time it's undercut by the general chaos of the episode. Quagmire, as he's preparing for his date, is singing it to himself, but it's more of a desperate plea than a joyous anthem. He's trying to convince himself that he's happy and that this deception is going to work. Brian's interjection, "Why are you using my full name?" when Quagmire is talking about his relationship troubles with Carrie, is a good indicator of Brian's growing discomfort with the whole charade. He's starting to feel like he's losing his identity by pretending to be a dog. This scene is important because it shows the emotional toll the deception is taking on Brian. He's not just playing along for tennis balls. He's starting to question his own agency and his friendship with Quagmire. It's a moment of character development, even if it's for a dog pretending to be a dog. What this scene is about is the desperation that drives people to extreme measures in relationships, and the internal conflict that arises when you have to compromise your integrity. Quagmire is willing to sacrifice his friendship with Brian for a chance at love, or at least sex, and Brian is struggling with his own complicity. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Brian start developing actual dog-like behaviors subconsciously, like chasing his tail or barking at the mailman during serious conversations. That would be a visual gag that underscores his loss of self. My reaction is a bit of sympathy for Brian. He's in a tough spot, and he's not exactly thrilled about it, but he's trapped by his own weaknesses and Quagmire's manipulation. Carrie's arrival and the fake dog introduction is where things really go off the rails. Quagmire introduces Brian as Harvey, named after Weinstein, which is a truly tone-deaf joke. Carrie's response, revealing her dog is Bob Weinstein, is the episode's most surprising and brilliant twist. It completely flips the script and shows that Carrie is just as capable of deception, if not more so. She's using the Me Too movement as a way to one-up Quagmire. This scene is the episode's comedic climax because it's so unexpected and so on the nose. It's a smart commentary on how people can use current social issues for their own gain, and how the game of deception can have many players. It's also a testament to the show's ability to push boundaries, even if it's with questionable taste. What this moment is saying is that everyone has their secrets and their games, and you never know who you're dealing with. Quagmire thinks he's so clever, but he's been outplayed by Carrie. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Carrie's dog be a series of increasingly bizarre and inappropriate stuffed animals, each named after a different controversial figure, and she'd explain each one with a similar, good-at-keeping-quiet logic. That would make the deception even more outlandish and unsettling. My reaction here is pure astonishment, followed by a hearty laugh. It's audacious, it's dark, and it's hysterically funny. It's the kind of joke that makes you say, did they really just go there? Yes, they did. Quagmire's proposal to Carrie is the ultimate punchline to his elaborate deception. He's so caught up in his own manufactured romance that he proposes almost immediately. Carrie says yes, and then the whole house of cards collapses. Lois is bewildered. Mazel tov? Where did that come from? And her bizarre reference to marvelous Mrs. Mazel tov feels like a writer desperately trying to inject some humor into an otherwise bleak outcome.
Quagmire's subsequent breakdown, crying, babe, please stop crying," reveals his genuine desperation. He's not just after sex, he's desperately seeking validation and companionship, even if it's built on a foundation of lies. This moment highlights the tragic comic nature of Quagmire's character. He's a sleazeball, but he's also a deeply lonely individual. His proposal is a desperate attempt to secure a relationship, any relationship, even if it's based on a lie. What this scene is about is the self-destructive nature of dishonesty. Quagmire's lie led him to a proposal, which is a huge step, but it's built on a falsehood that is bound to crumble. It's a cautionary tale about trying to be someone you're not. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Quagmire propose with a ring he stole from a vending machine, or one he had custom made to look like a dog toy. That would add another layer of absurdity to his desperation. My reaction is a mixture of pity and amusement. It's sad to see Quagmire so pathetic, but his whole situation is so absurd it's hard not to laugh. It's a classic Family Guy blend of dark humor and genuine character misery. Carrie's response to Quagmire's proposal is the ultimate rejection of his entire fabricated reality. When Quagmire tries to placate her, saying, "Look, how about we look at rings this weekend? I don't know, sales probably. Well, that's what we can afford since only one of us has a job," she subtly undermines him. Then, when she brings up her many dogs and the sheer logistical nightmare of it all, Quagmire is clearly overwhelmed. Her line, "enough to do a slow pan with music from Airplane," is a darkly funny visual. The fact that she calls him babe, but then immediately starts complaining about his son Brian and his work ethic, shows that she never really cared about Quagmire at all. She was playing her own game. The sheer number of dogs she owns is staggering, a clear sign that Quagmire's deception was never going to work. This scene shows the utter collapse of Quagmire's plan and the painful reality of his situation. He was so focused on the facade that he never considered the actual substance of Carrie's life, or his own lack of substance. What this moment is about is the consequence of dishonesty. Quagmire's lies caught up with him, and he was left with nothing but a mountain of dog food and the reality that he'd been played. It's a harsh lesson. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Carrie reveal that she was the one who set up the whole Bob Weinstein dog thing as a test for Quagmire, and she's not actually a dog person at all. She just enjoys playing mind games. That would make her even more of a dark antagonist. My reaction is a schadenfreude-fueled laugh. Quagmire deserved it. He played a stupid game, he won a stupid prize. The image of him drowning in dog food is hilarious. Finally, Stewie and Chris are on the run from Peter, hiding the candy. Their trip to Mr. Feldman's involves Chris trying to put Stewie in a backwards-facing car seat, which is a bit of a throwaway joke about safety regulations. The interaction with Mr. Feldman, who casually mentions he has 4 dead children, is a classic Family Guy non sequitur that's meant to be shocking and funny, but just lands as jarring. The core of the scene is Stewie's elaborate plan to hide his candy in the tree in the backyard, a desperate attempt to keep it safe from his father. Chris is there to help, showing that despite their differences, they can sometimes work together for a common goal, especially when Peter is the antagonist. What this sequence is about is the ongoing battle for resources within the Griffin household. Peter's gluttony is a constant threat, and Stewie's ingenuity is always in response to it. It's a microcosm of their dysfunctional family dynamic. If I were to rewrite this, I'd have Stewie's hiding spot be something incredibly clever and complex, like a hidden compartment in a garden gnome that requires a secret handshake and a password. The humor would come from Peter's inability to even figure out how to open the gnome. My reaction to this scene is mostly a shrug. It's the final wrap-up of the candy theft plot, and it's resolved with the usual level of absurdity. It's not particularly memorable, but it serves its purpose. So, looking at the characters. Peter, of course, is Peter. He's the catalyst for most of the chaos, driven by his insatiable appetite and complete lack of self-awareness. He's not evolved in the slightest, and this episode is just another testament to that. Lois is largely sidelined, acting as the exasperated wife and mother, which is her usual role. She gets a few lines, but she's not a major player in this particular story. Meg, as always, is the punching bag, suffering the indignities of Mayor West's outdated jokes and general mistreatment. She's a character who exists to be mocked. Chris is the dopey sidekick, easily manipulated and often the unwitting accomplice to Peter's schemes, as seen in the candy theft. He's not given much to do here besides be a pawn. Stewie is the brilliant schemer, the one who's always trying to outsmart everyone, especially his family. His candy heist plot is classic Stewie, showcasing his intellect and his paranoia. Brian is the cynical observer, the one who knows everyone's flaws but gets dragged into their messes.
His role as Quagmire's fake dog is a major plot point, highlighting his own complicity and his inability to escape Quagmire's orbit. Quagmire is the sleazeball with a hidden, desperate side. His deception to impress Carrie is the main driving force of his storyline, revealing his loneliness beneath the womanizing facade. Carrie is the unexpected twist, the woman who turns the tables on Quagmire with her own elaborate deception, using #MeToo as a weapon. She's a fascinating character who subverts expectations. Now for the hidden gems. First, that Borat impression from Mayor West. The joke itself is old, but the fact that the show knows it's old and has Meg call it out is a meta-commentary on aging pop culture references. It's like they're saying, we know this is old, but we're doing it anyway. Second, the oh my god reaction GIF costume for Stewie. This is a subtle nod to how much of our communication now happens through short visual memes.
Stewie, the precocious genius, is naturally ahead of the curve, not just participating, but embodying the trend. Third, the Succession name drops. This isn't just a random mention. It's a way to show Quagmire trying to connect through a shared, popular cultural touchstone, and it works on a superficial level. It also shows how shows like Succession have become part of our cultural lexicon. Fourth, the parallel #MeToo jokes with the Weinstein names for the dogs. This is dark humor, yes, but it's also a commentary on how quickly society reacts to these scandals and how they can become fodder for jokes, sometimes tastefully, sometimes not. It's a calculated risk by the writers. Fifth, the Clue meta-joke where Peter's involvement is described as "don't care" with "this game sucks" in "I regret having children." This is a deep cut that pokes fun at Family Guy's own convoluted plots and Peter's general disinterest in anything that doesn't immediately gratify him. It's a self-aware jab at the show's structure. What if they did it differently? Let's tackle Quagmire's fake dog deception. Instead of Brian, what if Quagmire tried to enlist Peter? Imagine Peter as a dog. His barking would be him demanding beer or complaining about Lois. It would be pure chaos, and Carrie would be horrified instantly, but the ensuing fallout would be hilarious. Quagmire would be trying to cover for Peter's drunken dog act, and it would be a spectacular train wreck. Another idea, the whole #MeToo dog name reveal. Instead of Carrie revealing her dog is Bob Weinstein, what if it was revealed that Quagmire's dog, Brian, was actually named after Harvey Weinstein, and Brian has been secretly hating it the whole time? That would add a whole new layer of passive aggression to their friendship. Or, what if the entire episode was just Stewie trying to protect his candy from Peter, and all the other storylines were just Peter hallucinating them while he was high on sugar? That would be a true Family Guy twist, leaning into the absurdity of Peter's actions. So, my verdict on this episode? I'd give it a